Welcome to a new podcast. I'm excited today to bring a message of hope. So we're going to talk about hope today, just what godly hope is, why we should have it, why it's important for us to cultivate hope in our lives. We brought in the new year, 2025, with a series of mini podcasts, if you will. And we just talked about how the Lord will begin to quickly reward those of us who have endeavored to grow into spiritual maturity, spiritual maturation, and how those rewards will be both on a corporate basis and also on an individual basis, and how those rewards will be both open and public. So we talked about that, bringing in the new year 2025. At some point later on, I plan on doing actually going into a little bit more detail around that discussion about spiritual maturity and how we can begin to identify spiritual maturity in our own lives, and also how we can help foster spiritual maturity in others. But today we're just going to take a slight pivot and talk about hope. So we're going to discuss godly hope. And we understand that godly hope, in other words, hope that is derived from God and His Word, godly hope, is not wishful thinking. So godly hope is not wishful thinking, but godly hope is simply an earnest expectation that is backed by a promise from God. So godly hope, or in other words, hope that is derived from God and His Word, godly hope is an earnest expectation, an earnest anticipation that has a backing, or that is backed by a promise from God. And we know that, a promise from God is simply God's Word. So God's Word is His promise, and God's promises are contained in His Word. So that is what godly hope is. So we understand that, godly hope now, in terms of wishful thinking and optimism, and that's really what a lot of folks are referring to when they start to talk about hope. They are referring to wishful thinking, or they're referring to optimism. And we know that, optimism is not necessarily a bad thing. We should be optimistic and we should have optimism. But godly hope, though it encompasses optimism, godly hope is far superior and far greater than optimism alone. So godly hope, though godly hope includes and encompasses optimism, godly hope is far greater than optimism. And here's the difference. Optimism does not necessarily, or is not necessarily backed by a promise from God. So I could be optimistic and I can have optimism apart from God's Word, apart from a promise from God. But godly hope has a backing, and that backing is God's Word. That backing is a promise from God. So that is the difference, and that is the distinction between godly hope and wishful thinking, or godly hope and optimism.